had so many questions.
Yes.
I was even laughing. I was like, I wonder if it's the same person. Just like, but there was one. There was someone that was for sure want to know like where God's called you in your singleness.
Yeah.
They were like asking some questions.
They were. Yeah, there was someone digging. I could feel it. And you can kind of like, when you start to get a bunch of questions and you're reading them, you can kind of start to see similar things inside of the way people write. So I was seeing some of the questions were probably coming from the same person. Unfortunately, dude, that app can be deceiving because people can pay on the back end to end up seeing like all the information about who's asking the question.
No way.
Yes.
So it's not truly anonymous?
It is, but if you pay, you can find out like the city, the state, the type of phone, their username or whatever, like, and I'm like, dude, that's pretty shady.
So you can kind of track them. You can kind of get maybe an idea.
Yeah, you can kind of locate. You can pinpoint.
Dude, that's crazy. Yeah, you're getting a lot of questions.
Yeah, a couple hundred. I think there was over 200.
So you said you're only doing YouTube now? Oh, you made a post
for longer form content. Yeah, so like stories, testimonies, things like that. Gonna do that on YouTube and really start to just narrow in on that. And then on Instagram, I'm gonna use it for more of like a promotional platform. Like a lot of the stories will be, Harvest Time Church, Against the Grain, people's brands, businesses, promoting stuff like that. And then on the timeline, I'd like to do more pictures and then like mini vlogs. So just like little things that I'm doing throughout the day, just take a quick little video, string them all together at the end of the day and kind of get an aerial view of what my day was like.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of use it more for that, more of like a lifestyle type of platform, and then YouTube more of like story and longer form content.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that you posted that.
Yeah.
That was funny. That guy like was like watching you as you're recording.
Yeah. He probably wanted to get in on the action because he asked if I was live. And then he started asking about Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
I couldn't hear him because he was way off, and I think he responded because I pronounced my last name Leong, and he's like Top G, because that's Andrew Tate calls himself Top G, and I was like, what? Up G? He's like, no, Andrew Tate. I'm like, oh, Top G. Yeah, I know who he is. But yeah, it's cool. I think that those kind of opportunities just kind of pop up in that LA area. I feel like they do. People are filming, recording, and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're all the time vlogging and stuff. It's cool.
It is cool.
Well, man, this is episode 2.
Yes.
Episode 1 was good. It was really, really good. Talked about healing and stuff, but I'm excited for today's episode.
Me too.
Man, I'm excited for these. I feel like, it's an open forum, but like I said, the last one, it gives us a chance to like be open, but also be like biblical and not just like, our personal stuff. Because if I had a personal channel, it'd be wild, man. It'd be like name dropping and experiences and stuff. But
yes.
But it's still good that we're able to kind of get into some stuff and everything. And shout out. I said shout out. That's hilarious. Don't shout out our church. I'm shouting out our church. We could totally clip this and start this over, but I'm totally leaving that in there. This is against
flow
the grain.
with it. This is against the grain, man. It's out of the box.
Not shout out. Shout out our church, Harvest Time.
Harvest Time.
Man, we're in the studio right now. It's been amazing just to use this space for, to be able to do this and stuff. And so we got 2 channels right now. So we got the Harvest Time channel, which we're doing we're going to do more clips on that channel, like the shorts, YouTube shorts.
Yeah.
And then this channel here, Against the Grain, will be for like the long episodes. Because some people, they enjoy the long stuff. I enjoy the long ones. I'll like when I'm driving or whatever. Even before we came, I was like watching one and stuff before you came or whatever. I just like, I can listen to something all day as long as it's interesting and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's some people that don't like that. They like little clips and stuff, like a minute, 2 minutes and stuff. So that's kind of the vision. So hopefully everyone can go over there, subscribe to Harvest Time, subscribe to that channel. And then and this channel as well too. It's been good. It's funny because I repurposed this channel. So I had someone reach out to me like, is this Do Work Manny? Because that was my channel before this.
Right.
Vlogs, abandoned videos. I thought I was like the coolest YouTube explorer. I got a chance to connect with some pretty cool guys doing that and stuff. But I'm glad to use this channel now just for ATG. So it's good. But episode 2, we're going to get into this today. Church hurt. Church hurt. And today during service, Pastor brought it up. he talked about it, and I gotta shout out Kevin, man. It was so funny.
Yeah, do it.
Everyone, my dad's like, who's been church hurt, and so many people raise their hands and stuff. A lot of people have.
Yeah.
And Kevin didn't. He was in the front row. They say never to sit in the front row because you're gonna get picked on.
That's
But
right.
Kevin and I right there front row, and Kevin didn't raise his hand. Dad's like, you never got church hurt, and he's just like, no. And my dad's like, dude, that means you have a heart of gold. Like you're just, man, you forgive easily because if you're in church long enough, you'll get eventually church hurt. But let's talk about church hurt. I think it's really good to talk about. I think it's really interesting. A lot of crazy stories with church hurt. I'll kind of share my thing. We'll kind of open it up too. But I'm curious as to see where this conversation goes, because with church hurt, a lot of people, I feel like what happens is, people can stay in unforgiveness, with church hurt. And we were talking about, pastor's whole thing, this next couple Sundays is going to be deliverance. So it's like, it's funny that he brought up church hurt because it opens the door to so much, to the demonic, witchcraft, all that. Like, it's just crazy. It can really take root in you. And I feel like that's how it kind of started. So I'll share my story just really quickly,
please, because
I feel like I could do a whole episode on this. But for those that don't know, we were in a previous church for 21 years, I think it was actually, because remember I was 21 at the time. And, I was basically born in that church. I always said, like, I'm going to be born in this church. I'm going to have my wedding in this church. I'm going to have my funeral in this church. I told Andrea that because I remember one time she asked me, she's like, would you ever think about moving churches? And that church is very close knit and stuff and everything. And I was just so comfortable there, I would have never thought.
How old were you when you made that statement? That's a big statement.
Yeah, I think I was like 19 or 20. Yeah, I was pretty young. But I was like, I'm never leaving. There's no reason to leave. Like, it was going, it was flowing. Like, growing up in that church, like I said, I mean, we had so many friends, that were there and stuff. Not so much like our family and stuff, which it's awesome now having our church because we have, a lot of our family comes and stuff. But there was mostly just a lot of friends that were there. Obviously, they were, they felt like family as well. But anyways, so we grew up in that church, had a long history there. My dad served, doing the ushers, doing Sunday school. He taught junior high. Andrea and I were youth leaders at the time, right before we left. And I had different roles kind of going, but I was really starting to do more of like the worship. I was playing drums. I was barely starting to play drums at the time too. So I was like barely like, kind of getting my feet wet. So it was just in a time that like, it just felt so new and like something new was happening and it was just exciting. And then all of a sudden, I'll never forget, my dad came to us and was like, hey, God's really speaking to me. And, I think it's really time for us for me to move on. It was just him at first. So this is when we started the Bible study. He told the previous pastor what we were doing and stuff and everything. But my dad was like, I really feel called like God's. And I was just like, I remember kind of being like a little bit upset at first because I was like, well, where are you going to go? Like, what are we going to do? Like, I kind of felt hurt and I kind of felt upset because I'm like, you're kind of leaving us. Like, wait, I'm going to go to church. It felt so weird.
So you were going to stay at the church?
Yeah.
And
there was no plan on us leaving. And he even told us, he's like, I don't want you guys just to follow me just because. And at the time we had just started Bible study, but we didn't think that was going to be a church. No way. We just thought it was like, just a Bible study or whatever. So then I was like, well, where are you going to go? And he's like, well, God isn't giving me like a specific location yet. And I forgot, I think he visited like a couple churches or something just to kind of like go somewhere for those first couple weeks until it was really like, we got called out, basically got pushed out. So I'm just going to share, I'm just going to be open with our story. So, cause we've already made amends and stuff. I've already talked to the pastor. I went, years later and talked with them, and I feel like everything's at a good point. So I feel comfortable sharing this, but, so, my dad, we started the Bible study. My dad steps out, he leaves the church and, in a good way, met with the pastor and everything. And then that's when he told us, he's like, I want you guys to stay. So that was the plan. And then all of a sudden, we started noticing like the leadership at the time, because we were youth leaders. So with the youth pastor and everything, it just started feeling weird. It started feeling like there was a lot of eyes on us, kind of like, what are we doing? Like, and everything. So and I don't blame them fully, because I'm like, I understand now being in leadership. Like if someone started a Bible study and it was kind of weird, even though we gave them the okay, you know what I mean? Like we did it in the right way, but it's still kind of weird. So anyway, so then we were kind of getting some weird looks and stuff or whatever. And then finally I remember like the meeting, like we got called in separately, but it was like, it was me first and then it was Andrea. But there was a youth pastor there, and then another one of the youth, like the assistant pastor kind of thing, one of the youth leaders, but he was kind of up there. And they were just like, hey, you know what? Like, we understand what's going on with this Bible study you guys got going and stuff, but we're just, we're not in the same vision right now. And, you're a youth leader here, but at this time, like you're no longer going to be a leader anymore. And I kept asking him, I was like, but what's the reason? Because I wanted them to tell me like, you did this and that.
Right.
But they didn't. And I was young at the time too and immature. So I feel like I couldn't really grasp like, what did I do?
Were you in high school or
I was 20? No, I was 21.
You were 21.
I think I just turned 21.
Okay.
So yeah, I was in college at the time, and I was just so hurt because I was like, what did I do? Like, just because of my dad. And I remember even saying like, my dad hasn't done anything to you guys. I kept saying that. And they were just like, well, this is just like what we feel and stuff. And they said it came from like the senior pastor as well too. So I'm like, how am I going to fight that, you know?
Yeah.
So I remember like that, I was just like, well, you know, like I remember like getting really upset and stuff, feeling like I wanted to cry and stuff. And I'm not a very emotional person. Like you said, you cry a lot.
I do. Yeah.
Like I honestly don't remember last time I cried. Like it just, actually I do remember it was Anthony, Lizzie's, his nephew. I think her nephew.
Yes.
He was like singing and playing drums on one of the videos on
remember
Thursday.
that, yeah.
Yeah, that brought me to tears. I was like, man,
Wow.
that's so awesome. Like the next generation. But anyways, I don't really cry that often. And that day I really felt like just tearing up and stuff, just really like upset, you know. Andrea gets called in right after me. They tell her the same thing. Like, you know, you guys are youth leaders and stuff, but we're taking you down and stuff. And, you know, I was like, okay, well, we can't go to the youth anymore because it's for high school. You know, we're supposed to be youth leaders. So where are we going to go now? So I went to the college, like young adults and stuff. And the guy that was leading that was actually the previous youth pastor, which we were super cool with and everything. So we kind of told him what happened, you know, and he was just like, man, that's messed up. But he was family to the senior pastor. So that church is very family oriented. A lot of like, you know, I'm just going to say a lot of like maybe favoritisms going on, a lot of stuff. Like if you're part of the family, you can kind of get away with stuff and all that. So I didn't really want to tell him too much, but I did kind of tell him in a nutshell, like, yeah, like we kind of got kicked out from that position, but it's not my fault. Like it's just because my dad left and they're worried and all this stuff. So he's like, don't worry, you guys can come. So we were there for probably like maybe like 2 or 3 services. Like, you know, for the midweek Sundays, we were still going to the main church, but then I really just felt like after the second or third one, it was nothing wrong with the young adults. And I was grateful that we were, you know, he accepted us in there and stuff. And, you know, we were doing well there, but I don't know, it just felt like God was really calling us to do something, you know, with my dad. So I remember, you know, telling my dad, like, hey, you know what, we're going to follow you. Like, we don't really know what's going on right now, this whole thing. Like, are we starting a church or are we not? But we feel like our time is done there. We just felt so, like, kind of outcasted. And it's funny because, dude, I'll tell you, like, we were there for 20 years, you know? And it's like, it just felt like in a moment, everything just changed. And now I remember, like, my dad will bring it up, you know, I remember one time, like, I was kind of upset with him and I something happened. I remember something and it wasn't totally my fault. Cause I remember like, he had said something to me in a way or something like that. And I was just like, well, I said something like, it's your fault that I'm going through this anyways. Like I shouldn't even be in this position or whatever. Like you put me in this position. He'll never forget. He'll like tell me about it, you know? And I told him that cause I just felt at the time, like, you better treat me like really nice and really good because I'm going through all this stuff. I just got kicked out of my previous church that I was there for like, you know, how many years because of your choice, you know? So anyways, all that to say with church hurt.
Wow.
After that, we started the Bible study. You know, I mean, the Bible study had already started. We started the church, an actual like Sunday service, renting out the YMCA in Covina right there. And after that, like right at that time, we started really feeling the heat from our previous church. And it was like a lot of like, you know, we asked one of the, you know, we're friends with everybody still there. So we asked one of the guys to come play bass for us. And I remember, you know, he told the youth pastor who kicked us out basically from our leadership. He tells the youth pastor, hey, I'm going over here, whatever. He had like a case with them with his bass. He was leaving the church to come over here. And our service at that time started at 12:30. They were already done with service. So it wasn't a thing where like we were taking him out.
No conflict or anything.
Yeah. So then he tells this young, he was a youth at the time. He tells him as he has his bass with him, packing up his mom's car. He's like, how dare you go over there? Are you kidding me? They're operating in witchcraft. They're in rebellion. They're all this stuff. Like, and then he tells the mom, because the mom told us when she came, she dropped him off and stuff. And she's like, hey, like, what was that about? She's like, yeah, he was telling me all this stuff, saying that the pastor's against you guys, that all this stuff, like you guys are like so bad, like all these things. And we were just like, wow, like we kind of felt it already, you know, but then to actually hear it, I was like, man, what else are they saying? And this was a pattern for the next, like, you know, at least like a good 3 years, dude. There was a pattern of just like hearing things about us and people like that. So all that to say is like we have a really big history when it comes to church hurt. And not that this ministry was birthed out of church hurt, but we could have, so many people I feel like go through church hurt which I understand we've been through there, but they go through it and then they either like give up their walk entirely with the Lord, or maybe they do go somewhere, but they're constantly just like bitter all the time. What we did as a family is we took that hurt and we basically launched a ministry from that. I don't want to say a place of hurt, but we launched a ministry, and like we're still here 10 years later. Like it's amazing. We're in a studio right now, here, like it's amazing. So it's like, I encourage people, like, we've been through it. You can turn something beautiful from church hurt into something amazing. And I'll kind of go on a little bit more, I'll kind of share more. I know I was kind of sharing a lot there, but what is your experience with church? Because you weren't saved all your life, so you were only in church, for so often, for however long. But what experience do you have when it comes to like church hurt?
Yeah. Well, first of all, before I share, man, thank you for sharing that. Like that's so much history. Like I never really thought about, because I've heard the story, but then to now like really consider, that's such a long time to be in one place for you to even say those words. Like, I want to get baptized here. I want to get married here. Like, dude, that's some real commitment, So for you to go through that and then, basically by not your own will, have to go through that, like that must have been, you must have felt out of control though, like you had no control, and it's one thing if like you have the control and you're doing something wrong or whatever, and then you get, consequences for it. And it's another thing if it's just like, by association,
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, it was by association. That must have been difficult. And then for you to feel like something's happening under the table, but then for it to surface and then someone to say like they're doing this, that's difficult, man. Yeah. But no, I grew up Catholic. So like, I mean, there was things in the Catholic Church that were there were issues, But in terms of after being saved, it was weird because when I got saved, it was so radical. I mean, people were so happy for a little bit. They were so happy because I was a drug addict. My mugshot was smeared all over Facebook. Like all people were reposting my mugshot because I had done a lot of people wrong before I got saved. So when I got in trouble, they were like, basically, haha, you know what I mean? And it spread because I was involved in a lot of community sports and different things. So it just went like wildfire. But then after I got saved, people were like super happy. Like, yeah, you're turning your life around. And then when I went deep and I just went hard into it, I was starting to push on people who had been saved in the church. And I remember super clearly. And now looking back, it's kind of weird because I was taken by when I got saved, the first church I was a part of, I was taken by the pastor's kid, and this was I think it's the biggest church in Minnesota. Wow. And I was taken and shown and being like, listen to his testimony, and kind of just moved around, like, listen to what's happening. And I was loving it because I was sharing, but I look back and I'm like, it was kind of like I was a prop. I was kind of being propped a little bit, and I didn't realize that. But then once I didn't stop and I kept going, people started to get upset with me. So the people who were promoting me and the testimony, I feel like I was blazing, and they were maybe jealous or something, Yeah. And then those people started to tell me to tone it down. So the same people who were like encouraging me were like, "Yo, you need to chill." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, what am I supposed to? I don't know what to do." Yeah. And so I felt like there was stuff behind the scenes that I was kind of running up against in some of the churches. Like they would allow me to do certain things, but then there was kind of a glass ceiling, and I felt it, and I was like, man, why don't they want me to, So that was difficult, but I think the biggest thing for me is, we talked about it right before, is I really value mentors and leaders. I really, really do. Like, I think that Paul said there's many teachers, few fathers and mothers. So those fathers and mothers, like, they have a voice in my life, Yeah. And, but I've been told some pretty harsh things by the people that I've trusted. And I feel like that's just people who are closest to you. They know you're open to them. Yeah. So arrows can go in and they can be harmful. So I think there was just two things for me, that were difficult when I had mentors or leaders who were speaking into my life who said certain things about the body of Christ that made me question my involvement in the church. And one specific thing, like I said to you, was I had a leader who I trusted, really, really trusted. And he said to me, if you ever take a leadership position in the church, you will spiritually die.
Man.
You will spiritually die. And, I was like, well, maybe he knows something I don't know, like maybe, because he's a lot older than me. He's been through a lot of things. Like maybe he knows something that I don't quite understand. And at the time, I had some like frustration with church leaders because I'm like, I'm all about the power and these types of things. And I was just wanting to see it happen, but I didn't understand. You have a lot of people, like it's hard to bring up an entire people in certain areas, you know, like that's a lot of people to raise up. So I was like, you need to do this now, boom, boom, boom. And I feel like a lot of prophetic people do that. A lot of prophetic people, they see certain things and they're like, you need to change now. And it's like, okay, you try to sway a whole group of people who you've been training and raising. It's not a quick overnight thing. And even pastor at church today, he mentioned, people come in and like, even when the church started, people would come into your dad and say, you need to do this. Yeah. It's like, it's not that easy. It takes time. Yeah. So I had frustrations at the time when this was spoken to me. So I almost grabbed onto it a little bit. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, maybe I'll do what you're doing. Yeah. But those words, I had to uproot them, and I really had to test them when leadership opportunities opened up for me here. And that was part of the battle that I never shared with you, but I'm like, okay, this was spoken to me, and it really did jade my view of what it meant to be part of the body of Christ, and I felt to a degree unheard in certain churches before me, just because they were like, yeah, like you can go do your thing in the corner, and that's really how I felt in some of the churches where I felt like God was having me serve, and I would be allowed to serve to a degree. And then beyond that, it's like, you're going to disrupt our system that we have going on here. So no. And so I had some frustrations with the church. And so I had to cool off a little bit and pull back and say, okay, what am I going to choose to believe here? What does the Bible say about this? Yeah. Don't forsake the gathering of yourselves together. Paul the apostle submitted himself to other people. Paul, you know what I mean? Like if he decided to submit himself to other members of the body of Christ, like who am I to not be a part of a fellowship? Yeah. So I had to really use the word to bring my soul into the right place. Yeah. So I would say for me, it's really just been leadership challenges where people that I've trusted have poured certain things that because of trust, I've kind of overlooked the Bible. Because of relationship, I overlooked the Bible. And God's like, you can't do that. And there was a thing I put on my story one time, and I said, honor without boundaries, which I kind of should have said like respect. Respecting somebody without having boundaries can lead to idolatry. So you hold somebody in such high esteem, but you don't present the truth, or you don't have boundaries. You start to just do whatever they tell you to do, even if it's against the word of God. Yeah. So I had to course correct, and that took some time.
That's good. And it's important that you're talking about leadership. I feel like a lot of the church hurt definitely does come from the leadership, because we see them in a certain light, and we see them and we, it's like their word is gold to us. And, especially when you're young in the faith, or you're kind of, maybe you're not super experienced, because I think now we're at a good place. It's like we have a good understanding, like man is human and he's going to mess it up, and I'm not going to freak out just because of something. But at the same time, there's definitely things I think that, leaders and pastors, maybe they'll do something where it does call, you might need to leave that place and go to another place, and stuff like that. So I'm definitely not for the abuse, and stuff like that. But It's important that you're bringing up leadership with that, because I just want to say this as us being leaders, I feel like we have to be very, very careful when it comes to church hurt as a leader. Yes. Because I know what it's like on the other side, obviously being a member, but now being a leader. everything that we say, everything that we do, all of our actions, when we're upset, when people get us upset, everything, like it really, really is important, and people are looking at us. And, you know, maybe there's pastors watching this. If you're a pastor, you have to, I feel like, you know, aside from all the duties, you know, the normal stuff that the pastors have to deal with, they also, like, I feel like people need to understand as pastors, like, you guys have sheep that you guys are responsible for, and people, pastors, men of God, they can take advantage of people, you know, and it's like, you need to be careful what prophecies you're giving as a pastor, what words you're giving, how much you're involved in people's lives. That's something for me that I, as a leader myself, I try to really take that in consideration. There's things that, you know, I have my opinions on, and I feel like people should be doing this, and that. But me as a leader, I've never been the type to be like, you need to do this, you need to do that. I never want to do that, because I know and I respect that people see me in a certain, you know, at a certain level and stuff. And I respect that power. And I'm like, okay, I know that I could take advantage of people. Honestly, like, it's crazy to say that, but I can take advantage of people being in the position that I'm in. I can use my power and all that. So I'm so careful not to abuse that line of, like, you know, people's lives and stuff. I try not to even get close to it, because I know what that's like, you know, I know what that's like. And as a pastor, like I said, I feel like, you know, you have to be very, very careful, because at the end of the day, you're going to answer, you know, I feel like with pastors, you can feel like, oh, I don't have to answer anybody. Especially if you're like the, you know, the head pastor, there's no one really above you. Maybe you don't have a big covering, or they're always checking in on you. You could pretty much get away with whatever you want and just be into the thing of like, well, I'm the pastor. This is my house, you know, and all that. But it's like, eventually you're going to stand before God, and you're going to give an account for everything you've done as a pastor. You know what I mean? So, what can you be specific at all? Is any of the stuff that you heard from your leader, as far as, because I want to go back real quick, because you said about your leader saying stuff about, you know, ministry and stuff. Do you think that that you were told those things because it was like a control thing to get you not to join a church? Was that the kind of the reason behind it?
Yes, I think that was one reason behind it. And it's weird, because I felt like I had like this split relationship with the church, where and this is odd, where I've never not been involved with the church. There was like a month, maybe 2, where I wasn't in a congregation, and I felt weird. And that was when, in transition time, when the church that I was a part of, they went under this huge construction in their building, and they were using another building. And so it was like this like translucent kind of, we're using their building, but the times aren't necessarily set. And it was just kind of this difficult moment in time. So I've always been, once I got saved, I've always been a part of the congregation. I've always gone Sunday after Sunday, been involved with the youth. Like, I've always been involved with the pastors and their children, if they're like my age. Always been involved. But then at the same time, I've had spiritual mentors who were, you know, both of them were prophetic people and weren't really involved in the church. So both of my mentors, as prophetic as they were, and they really were, and as gifted as they were, and they really were, they weren't in submission to the leadership of a pastor or an apostle. So I had this weird thing going on where I was like, okay, and I didn't think too deeply about it, but I'm like, my leaders are not in a church. And to a degree, I'm like, well, they're so big. You know, one of my mentors, he literally advised a president of a country for years on end. So I'm like, well, how can he be part of a local church? Like, he's traveling all the time, you know? And that's where that line gets really weird, where it's like, okay, you're so big, but are you submitted to a congregation? And I go back to the apostles, Apostle Paul and these guys, like, they were accountable to each other. They had submission to each other. So, yes, though I do believe, because I was, and this is where, you know, I would love to in the future do, you know, talk about the prophetic and things like that, because I've learned a lot, and I've learned how people can manipulate things in the name of prophecy for the sake of personal agenda.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's where the control and manipulation comes in. And that's where I believe, like, you know, because before I came, and I'm just going to be raw with it. Yeah. Before I came here, I was ready to leave everything and go be a part of this ministry. And that was the person who said to me, hey, listen, you know, if you join leadership of a church, you will spiritually die.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at those two things and then I look at the greater picture, I'm like, okay, because at the time too, the leadership at my church was leaving and there was a huge opening for leaders to move up into positions of leadership.
Well,
And it's crazy because one of the men of God that we both know, he gave a prophecy to me and he said, you don't know this, but people have approached previous leaders of yours and have asked of you, and your mentors told them, no, you can't touch him. He's not ready. And whoa, that bore witness with me, man. Even though like the knowledge, it bore witness with me.
Wow.
So I'm like, man, I don't have any, resentment or issues like that. But I will say, looking back, I was under, at least to a degree, a spirit of confusion or even deception. And that was another word that a prophet who didn't know me from a different country on a Zoom call at Harvest Time Church, he gave me a word.
I heard about that.
He gave me this word and he said, you were under mentorship who was deceived. Wow. And then another man of God came in who we had here in the studio, and at lunch he said, I started telling my story, and him and his wife said, well, do you think that you came under some of that? And I said, yeah, I do. And they both said, yeah, we do too. And so that's the point of deception. It's like, you don't know you're deceived. So for me, I was following and had all these reasons, but behind it, there was kind of this tight grip. And I'm not the only person who has that experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do believe that there was control involved, and it doesn't negate like so many of the other amazing things, but when you start to have your own desires and agenda, and then the issue is when that mixes with prophecy.
Yeah, that's the big one.
That gets to be really messy.
Because then it's like, how do you go against what God has spoken or something? It's like, it's just a mess. We for sure need to tackle prophecy, like a whole podcast episode just on prophecy, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a lot there.
There's a lot.
When it comes to, like I said, people go through real stuff and people have been hurt and stuff like that. Let's talk a little bit about, people leaving churches and being church hurt, whether it's valid or whether it's not. I wish I could say that, in the last 10 years here at HCC that like everyone that's been here has been, is still here from the beginning. There's people for sure, I'll just be honest, that have left that feel church hurt. And I know a lot of the situations, and I can say a lot of them there definitely was like two sides to it. They weren't innocent either, and stuff. And, there's just been a lot, but let's kind of talk about, when you really are hurt, kind of what to do with that. Because I feel like, we can, share all of our experiences, but what can people do? So let's say a situation does happen, and whether, a lot of times it's like the pastor, and it's funny because pastor's always saying this, and it's so true. He's like, the church can be church hurt, but he's like, as a pastor, can I be like member hurt?
That's so good.
And it's like, people need to understand first and foremost that like, if you're part of a church and you leave that church, like there's relationships there, not only with the people around you, the people that you're with, your congregation, but your pastor. Your pastor has poured into you. Your pastor has spent time with you, has gone through deliverance probably with you, probably a few times, you've done life with him. You've been over his house. My dad, our pastor, he's very open, and he'll go have lunch with you and stuff like that. And there's a lot of pastors that won't do that at all. And even like small churches, they're very, once it comes to ministry, they're here, but after that, it's like they're disconnected and stuff. But my dad's not like that, But anyways, he said that before, like, can a pastor be member hurt? Because everyone, and I think it's everyone's different. Like specifically with HTC, like, our pastor, he's very like, his heart's very open. And I think because of that, he can get hurt and people can hurt him and stuff. And for me, I think like, I don't want to say I'm more cold, but I'm kind of just like, I've had a lot of friends that have been in ministry that have been here and stuff like that, whether they passed away, people have left for stuff. People have said stuff about me, about my family that are completely false and messed up and jacked up and stuff. There's been lies told about us and there's a bunch of stuff. And I feel like because I have had so much of that experience already, I'm kind of a little bit more like guarded in a sense, but that's also bad because then it's like you don't let people in, you know. And I've shared this with you and I was like, man, like I'm thankful for our friendship because
Yes.
to be honest, I've had a lot of jacked up friends, like just being honest. Like, and this is, I'm talking about ministry here. Like people have said stuff, people have done all these things, like just shady stuff. And it's just like, you can get to a point, and I know people that are in this church right now that are like that, where they're just like, we don't want to be friends with anybody. We don't trust anybody. Like, you know, people have done this, and that. And I'm like, so I have that guard up in a sense. Like I'm just kind of like, you know, I kind of watch a little bit, but I'm also like, I try to be open as much as I can. But going back to it, how do you think people should leave if they are hurt, something happened in the church, a situation happened? What's the right process? Because biblically it says, you know, going, talking to the person, stuff like that. Should we start with that approach? How should we handle when we're hurt by someone in the church?
It's such a good question. I love what you brought up there about, you know, if someone sins against you, go to him, you know, and if he doesn't repent, then bring somebody else with you. And if he doesn't repent, then bring him before the church. And if he doesn't repent, then remove him, basically. Yeah. So that's if someone is living in sin, you know, constantly, and they're just damaging people. I think the first thing you don't want to do is leave. I think that's the first thing because that's the first temptation. You get hurt, boom, I'm gone. I'm to another place. And that's where we talked, you know, Pastor talked this morning about people who, he's like, how many churches have you been to? You know, how many jobs have you had? Yeah. So people just, because they get hurt, they'll go try to find a place where they won't get hurt. And then they'll get hurt. And then they'll be like, and then eventually they're like, you know, the church is all messed up, so God's messed up, so I'm not going to church. Yeah. And that's a really big jump, but that's the progression that I see in a lot of people. So I think the first thing you don't want to do is just leave right away. Because there's, like you said, there's two sides to every story. And a lot of times people get hurt, but they don't realize maybe sometimes they're the cause. They caused something, and then they got, you know, reaction, and then they didn't even see what they did.
I call it like the common denominator. Common denominator in math is like that number that's in all the fractions, right? Right. I failed math, but I think I remember that one right. I always say like, if you're the common denominator, if there's always problems and you're like, people hate me, people always, all the enemy, everyone this and that, people, whatever. And it's like, but are you the common denominator in all of the drama? Because I guarantee there's people that I've known that are the common denominator all the time. And then one final thing happens and they're like, I'm leaving. And it's just like, okay, that situation, yeah, whatever. But how many other situations have you been involved in and you were involved? Like, why? Yeah. You know?
That's good. And I think that you can see other people so much clearer than you can see yourself. And that's why Jesus is like, yo, take the log out of your eye first before you deal with the speck in other people. But I think and I think this is really where it comes down to the root system of a believer. Like, how rooted are you in the Lord versus your community, you know? And I think that people who don't have deep roots in God, they will literally go to try to find another community where they belong because they haven't found that in Jesus. They haven't found that belonging, that acceptance. And because of that, they'll just go to a bunch of different places. Yeah. So I think number one is don't leave. Yeah. Don't leave right away. You know, obviously there's like, that's the principle. You know, we talk about abuse, and we talk about if someone's just like railing on you over and over and over, and there's some really messed up stuff, well, then you might have to take a step back. But I think step one, don't just jump ship. Because me personally, I've had opportunities to jump ship in different places multiple times. Yes. And I'm like, okay, I had to take a deep breath. I had to consider, okay, what's really going on here? And this is where the enemy starts to get involved because he wants to break the body of Christ. He wants to snap our forearm. He wants to literally get in there and create division when he has an opportunity. So I think, you know, we start to think about it that way. We can't let him do that. So we got to figure out, okay, this isn't me versus so-and-so. Yeah. There's something else going on here. Yeah. And what is it? And I guarantee you take some time and you start to reflect on yourself and examine yourself, you start to realize, I had some part to play in that. Yeah. Most likely. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And like I said, like, you know, in our situation, you know, when we first left our church, to be honest, I was young and stuff. So like, I just went to Facebook, and it's sad because, you know, you get Facebook memories, right? Yeah. And I look at stuff like 10 years ago, and I would be posting stupid stuff like, just low key shade to like our previous church, like when man says no, God says yes, you know. And it's like, what else did I see when I saw one the other day? Because it was around this time. It was summer of 2010? No, sorry, 2012.
2012.
Summer of 2012 is when we basically left, when we just started the church. So, because we just celebrated 10 years in June.
Yes.
So this is like fresh. So right now I'm getting all the memories right now.
Wow.
Just stupid stuff like that. Like, yeah, like, you know, man should never hold you back. It's all about, you know, seeking the Father. And I remember even when we had our first Sunday service, I was like, so thankful for a place that we can just let the Spirit move and not let man just give us 30 minutes to worship or something crazy like that. I'm just like, oh my God. And I had friends obviously all from like my previous churches and stuff. And I'm just thinking like, that's so stupid, you know? And luckily like my friends at the time were also young and immature. So hopefully they didn't think I was that wild.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I'm sure there's other mature Christians that saw me at that time and just thought like, man, he's probably going through something, you know? It just makes you look so ridiculous, you know? It's crazy. But, going back to it, it's like I had to go back to our previous church and speak with the pastor and speak with the youth pastor and like basically restore relationships because I was so bitter towards them. And I had legitimate reasons of what happened and stuff. We got kicked out of stuff, them saying stuff. Like Dre and I literally went back and met with our previous pastor and was like, hey, we're sorry we left. Knowing that he had a hand in what happened, we still went back and we're just like, because we never met with him, with our head pastor leaving, you know, the senior pastor. And like I said, he's known me since he was a little kid. I played with his son, like his son and my brother and I, we all like grew up together. We were the same age. So we've been together forever. And it's like, I didn't even say bye or nothing. Cause I just, well, you know, I felt like he was kicking me. They were all kicking me out. So I didn't even think about it. But now I'm just like, even if that would have happened now, even if I was being kicked out of somewhere, I would still meet with the pastor and be like, hey, thank you for everything you've taught me. Because at the end of the day, they taught me a lot. They taught me all the foundation. You know, thank you for everything. I appreciate it. And, you know, I understand, you know, your guys' decision and stuff. And I just want to say even something small, like a 10-minute, 15-minute meeting, you know what I mean? Nothing crazy. But anyways, we went back years later and said like, you know, said our piece and stuff like that. And I feel like we're at a good you know, we're at a good place and stuff. But I think that's really important is like not to leave right away. You know, in our situation, every situation is a little bit different, like you said. And I love that you're speaking on this because to be honest, like I've seen you go through things. I've seen you, you know, like you said, you've had opportunities, you know, to do things, to leave. I mean, you came here, you weren't even supposed to be here. Technically, you were going to go up the coast and stuff. So like if things happen here, you can easily be at a point to be like, well, I wasn't going to be here anyways. I'm out. You know what I mean? And it's just like, you're not just telling us things and speaking on it, just like, hey, this is what you should do. I've seen you walk these things out. So for me, it gives it like, you earn a lot of my respect on that because I'm like,
thank you.
You're not just speaking this. We're not just wasting time. You're talking about this. Like you really know what you're talking about and it's worth for you. Look where you're at right now. You know what I mean? Like you're doing super well. Like it's amazing. You know what God's doing. Amazing things coming up for you. Opportunities and stuff. It's just awesome. But anyway, so number one, don't leave.
Don't leave. And I love what, I love the honor there to be able to go and speak with somebody, even if time has passed, you know, to go and speak with them and say, hey, listen, like to bless those, you know, it's a strong statement, but like bless those who hate you, pray for those who persecute you, you know, love your enemies, Jesus would say. So even people who, you know, who oppose you to give a blessing there's such honor in that. And I believe that releases power to you. I mean, I heard of a minister who is really well known in Russia, and he talked about how a competing another church who was like the primary church in that area basically was like cursing him for coming in and trying to start a church. And he had the guy who came in basically was like started to speak bad about the other pastor. And then God asked him one day, do you want revival? Do you really want revival? And he's like, God, you know I want revival. You know I want revival. And he goes, then go and kneel before that other pastor. Wow. And he's like, what? No, he did this to me. And he's like, you want revival? And he went before him and he knelt down and he talked about the resistance that he was like his flesh, you know, but he knelt down and just said, I honor you. And regardless of this guy's reaction, he knew that he had to do it and God blessed him for it, you know? So there's a blessing involved there. But I think too that we tend to, how do I say it? We tend to disassociate people from God when we are upset. And we tend to disassociate from scriptures that basically say all leadership is God ordained, even if they're evil. If they're evil. So like if we get hurt, we are like, oh, it's just a human being. We don't have to respect them. And God's like, I put them there. I literally put them in that place. You have to honor them. Wow. So we disassociate ourselves from people. And like you said, like, man can hold you back, but God will bless you, right? Like we disassociate from the people, from God in those scenarios. And people who are church hurt, they'll only see flesh and bone. They'll only see flesh and blood. They won't see the spiritual side of it, like how God says, do everything you do unto the Lord. But then when things are good, we'll do that. We'll honor the man of God. We'll honor people when they're good. We'll associate the spiritual with the physical. Yeah. And it's weird how that happens. But yeah, that's what I noticed too, is that you can easily get focused on people when you're hurt. Yeah. And lose sight of the fact that, hey, listen, God is sovereign. God is overall. And that's why I love what Peter says. And it's so good because I think, I said this a little bit on my story one time, but you talk so much, and I hear so much of Peter and his writings and the truth there when you speak, like leadership, service,
cutting off people's ears.
Cutting off people's ears. I love that, bro. Well, you did say one time that you got up in your friend's face. You remember that?
Sorry,
you got up and sorry. But it's funny because like, that's funny. But there's so much that I hear that and Peter was such a pastor. Paul was like, he was really an apostle and a teacher, but Peter was an apostle and he was a pastor. And he talked about being a shepherd and an overseer, and you take care of people's souls. And so even in this conversation, you've talked about we have to give an account and think. Peter, that's such Peter language, But one thing Peter says is he says, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king.
Yes.
Dude, the king was killing Christians. He was murdering Christians, but Peter said, honor the king. And you talk about brotherhood. You always write about like the brothers and the brotherhood, and so I love that about you, that you write that and you live that, like, hey, listen, even if they're, messed up, there's still honor that's due there. Yeah. And that's really important. When it comes to church hurt, it's really important. That scripture is so important, because if you can honor people that have dishonored you, you can keep yourself in a place where you're not able to get stolen from the devil.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So,
and we just talked about it today. Like I said, we talked on deliverance, and that's why Pastor brought it up. And I feel like a lot of open doors for sure are from church hurt. And let's call it like it is. The whole movement of like deconstruction, dude. They'll probably lie if you do a census and stuff, or like a poll or whatever. But if you really if they were 100% truthful and you took a poll on everyone that's in deconstruction, the whole Christianity thing, like I guarantee a huge high percentage is going to be for people that have been hurt by the church. Oh yeah. And we've seen it here. I've personally known of circumstances, situations, people and stuff that have been, hurt, and it's things that are like, some things can be very petty. Some things are really serious, but they go into this thing of like, oh, we're here to deconstruct, Christianity. And all of a sudden it's just like, it's like just borderline witchcraft, and just like, it's so much deception. Like you were saying earlier, all from what? From church hurt. Have you seen anything like that when it comes to like deconstruction and stuff, Christianity and all that?
I have. I recently had this interaction with somebody who said, the world treats me better than the church. And this is somebody who's a Christian. And I'm like, when I see that, when I hear that, I look at, we were talking earlier about C.S. Lewis, screw tape letters, things like that. I zoom way out and I'm like, okay, what's the spiritual agenda with somebody who's a Christian? And now all of a sudden there's all these people that are in the world that are coming around them somehow, and they're being positioned, and they're all treating this person really nice, and they're going through testing in their own faith. And I'm like, look way out. I'm like, what's the agenda for this person? Because it's like, if there's millions of spirits and things, demons, they'll all try to coordinate an attack, and they'll wait for that open door, until someone's like, yeah, maybe the Bible doesn't really mean that. Maybe someone who gotten hurt by a man, maybe they missed an S before he, and it should have been she when God said, she. Oh, dude,
Yeah,
you know what I
crazy
mean?
stuff, crazy stuff.
People, Jesus didn't really, when Jesus said, and this is someone that I listened to on TikTok that I believe is just heretical and just straight up heretical and leading people astray. And literally said, when Jesus said to Lazarus, come out, he was saying, come out, like,
No,
come out of the closet.
No.
Yes, he was.
What?
That's what this guy on TikTok was saying that Jesus was saying about Lazarus when he
Like
literally
homosexuality? Come out as a homosexual.
Come out as a come out of the bondage. Come out of
Jeez.
what people have put on you. Because Jesus did say, take off the grave clothes after he, right? So there was like a process of resurrection and deliverance. From Lazarus, resurrection and deliverance in the process. But then this person, because of wounds, because of these things, literally said that Jesus was metaphorically saying to Lazarus, come out of the closet, take off the religious system and clothing that people have put on you and be your true self.
Dude, that's a crazy thing. I've heard some crazy stuff. That's a crazy one.
Isn't that?
That's wild.
That video blew up on TikTok.
Jeez.
Blew up on TikTok. And I believe there's just deep church hurt there. Deep hurt to the point where someone's still trying to find God, but they're just morphing everything. And like I said earlier, you start to get into wounds and things, delusion. James says it in a really interesting way. He says, where there is envy and self-seeking, where you're self-seeking, trying to preserve yourself, there is confusion and every other evil thing amongst you. Dude, that's an all-encompassing.
It's heavy.
That's heavy. Where there's envy and self-seeking, there's confusion in every other evil thing. And so I think that really speaks to, hey, people are trying to like protect themselves, protect their image, protect them, what they feel about themselves or who they feel they are. They start to get into some delusional type of things, and it's sad to see. It really is.
It's crazy. That's what I've never heard of that. That's crazy. You have to send me that video.
I will.
I need to see it for myself. It's wild.
It is.
I mean, it's at the point now I don't really question anything. Like people say the craziest things, but that's wild.
Yeah, man.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and he was bold about it too. Very bold.
It's crazy because TikTok's huge right now. I mean, I'm sure there's people in the comments that are probably like, "Oh, this is crazy," but other people are like, "Yeah, this makes sense," and it just like that open door just for the enemy, and because they're probably church hurt as well too. It's wild. I think about Jesus and I'm just like, okay, Jesus is the perfect example for us, always looking at him. It's like, if you really think about him, those that were in the church, like, the Pharisees, everything, like the religious system, like they wanted nothing to do with them, right? With the help of like, the Romans and stuff like that, end up putting, crucifying him, the whole thing. And then I think about Jesus just hanging on a cross, and he's just like, bleed, like just everything that he's gone through, pain, suffering, being whipped, beaten, all this stuff. And it's like, he still is up there and is like, Lord, forgive them for they know not what they do, and it's like, like I said, there's some serious stuff when it comes to church. There's things that people maybe didn't have any part in it at all. They were 100% innocent, like Jesus, 100% innocent, hasn't done anything wrong, There's people like that have been innocent, and something will happen to them. They played no part in it, but still things happen, right? And I just think about Jesus, and I'm like, I've seen people go through crazy stuff, but I've never seen anyone crucified here. I've never seen anyone to that extreme, And it's like, if Jesus can hang there, and in his dying moments, last hours, whatever the time frame was, just to be like forgiving, like, Lord, forgive them for they know not what they do. Like, Father, like literally like pleading for their lives after they're spitting on them, saying stuff to them, like, they're veiled. They don't know who Jesus is. And, stuff like that. They didn't see who was in front of them and everything. But anyways, going back, I just think about Jesus and I'm like, if he can do it, and if he can hang up there and just say like, Father, forgive them, then what's our excuse? Like, we don't have any excuse. And it's like, when we stand before God, let's say, it was me and I was church hurt, and I don't even want deconstruction. I don't want anything to do with church at all. I'm completely like, give up everything. I don't even go to church anymore. I don't even believe in God anymore. When you stand before the Father, because we all are one day, when we stand before him, that little thing of church hurt, whatever that situation was, it's going to look so minor compared to eternity. You know what I mean?
So true.
It's going to look so minor compared to eternity, And like I said, I think about Jesus and I'm just like, if he can go through everything he went through, being spit on, all this stuff, made fun of, like, times 1,000, you know, and then beaten, all of that, and he can still be up there and forgive, then we have no excuse.
It's so good.
We have no excuse. Even if you were abused, even if there's some crazy stuff that's happened, sexual abuse. I see, you know, you hear that a lot with pastors and taking advantage of people, women, boys. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter who anymore. It's like they take advantage of anybody. You see all these stories.
Yeah.
But still, even if that's you, it's like forgiving that person.
Yeah.
And, you know, we first said don't leave, but in a situation like that, you know, there's other churches that are out there and stuff. I definitely feel like, you know, if it's an abusive situation, then it is time. You know, every situation is different, right?
It is.
But something to that extreme. But anyways, going back, I really think about that a lot, and I'm like, we have no excuse.
So
we have no excuse. If like today, everyone in the church hates me here. My dad, everyone, they kicked me out, they disowned me. I'm not going back. I'm gonna find something else to do. I'm gonna go somewhere, maybe, I don't know, find something to do. I'm not giving up my relationship with God, because even how bad it's gonna hurt here, I just think about eternity, and I'm like, it's gonna seem so tiny compared to eternity. You know what I mean?
It's so good. That's so good. That's such a good mindset to have. Like, because if you can fix yourself, well, that's what Paul says, right? If you can fix your mind on things above, you'll stay in the Spirit. You'll walk in the Spirit. You won't. The lust of the flesh is probably to get angry, bitter, hateful, and run away. That's probably a lust of the flesh, you know? But if you fix your mind on things that it's like, if you can put your moment into perspective, which is that's a discipline. It's difficult, and but it's possible. You know what you're saying, and I think it's so good. I think, you know, I want to touch back on what you just said about principle. Principle is, you know, there's always exceptions. You know, Paul said, principle, don't divorce your wife. Exception, if this happens, you have, you know. So I love what you said about principle and exception, but I think that's what it comes down to is, can we look at Jesus? Can we look at him in the middle of whatever is going on around us? Can we lift our eyes from Israelites, right? Walking through the wilderness, boom, they're getting bit by snakes. And I guarantee you they would have had this paranoia of like, is there a snake? Is there a snake? But that wasn't what that wasn't their prescription. It was look up. Look up and look at the snake that's around the rod. You know, and that's a foreshadowing of Jesus. So when there's all this, like, there's vipers in the grass, you know, it's like classic, you know, vipers in the grass, mow your lawn so you can see the snakes around you. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like those types of things. But if there's danger around you, the prescription isn't to try to avoid it necessarily. It's to just focus on Jesus. Yeah. And that's difficult when you know, like, you know, you've been bit before. You know how that feels. You know that you can be poisoned by it. But and I think Paul is a good example too. Paul goes through some crazy, persecution when he gets saved. He gets saved, and all the Christians are like, we don't want him at our church. We don't want him at our church. You know, he must have had some church hurt. Yeah. He gets saved, and he's like, forget you guys. I'm going to keep going, blazing a trail. And he gets bit by a snake on an island, and he just shakes it off. He just shakes it off right into the fire. Yeah. And I think there's physical, you know, he's like, he knew, I can't die. God lives on the inside of me. But also, too, it's a picture of, hey, you know, you can shake things off. Just shake them in the fire, keep moving on. Things that would wound the world, poison the world, they don't have to wound us because we have different blood, you know, on the inside of us. And it all comes back to exactly what you said. Can we fix ourselves on Jesus at the end of the day?
That's it. And I think, too, like, is also you know, another thing is also, you know, maybe steering clear of people that are also church hurt because they say, like, you know, finding people that lick each other's wounds and stuff. Yes. I remember Isaiah Saldivar said that one time in a preaching way back in the day. He was just like, you know, stop fighting other believers just so you guys can lick each other's wounds and stuff like that. Like, it was just like very, you know, that's very vivid. Crazy, you know, and everything like up front. But it's like, man, that's true. You know, you see that a lot. You know, people that leave churches and stuff, all of a sudden it's like, hey, that whole group left our church. Like, what the heck? Like, they're all hanging out, kind of like a random group that didn't really hang out too much here. And it's just like, they leave and all of a sudden now they're together. It's kind of just like, it's kind of weird. Like, what's the talk there? Like, what are you guys bonding over? And, you know, maybe we're just jumping into speculation and stuff, but it happens. That does happen where it's like, you know, people lick each other's wounds and stuff. I think that's also very dangerous too, because maybe there's 3 people that are hanging out now, you know, that have all left the same church or whatever. And one of them was a real thing. Like one of them, they didn't do anything wrong or whatever. Something happened and they just felt like they needed to go or whatever. But let's say the other two, you know what I mean? They left as well too, but they were involved in something, you know, they were involved in gossip. They were involved in something, you know, and all of a sudden it's just like, all of a sudden now they kind of poison the other, you know, or it could be even two people that left in a right way because of something happened, but that one person can pollute the whole group. Well, yeah, well, you know about that church and you know how they are and they're this and they're that. And you know what I mean? All this crazy stuff. And it's like, I think if you are going to leave your church for whatever reason, you got to be very careful to not find a community of people that have either left the same church or maybe other churches and stuff. Like stay away from that.
So
like
good.
If you left in the right way and stuff, be pure in that, and God's going to lead you somewhere else. Pray about where you're going to go next. If you have to leave a church, you know, there's, like I say, it's like church is like, you know, a shoe, just find one that fits. You know what I mean? Like you're going to find one that fits.
Yes.
Find one. And it's hard though, especially in a area that we're in now, even like where we're at geographically, it's hard to find a good church around here. It really is. And not to be like, oh, Harvest Time's the only one. No, but it's like, there's not that many choices out there because you're not going to get everything that maybe we're experiencing here. You know what I mean?
True.
Whether it's worship, teaching, community, we hear a lot of these things like, oh, I left this church because here there's more community here. You know, hey, I went to another church, but they don't have worship like they do here. You know, just different things, or the preaching or teaching, or even like guest speakers. Like I think we've had more guest speakers. We've had for sure more guest speakers here in a year than our previous church had in 20 years.
Wow.
Like that's crazy. And it's not even like we're bringing people in every single month, but I would say at least every other month we have somebody here, you know, a guest or whatever. So anyways, going back to it, it's like being very careful of who you surround yourself with, and then the gossip that can follow after you leave a church.
That's so good, man. That's so good. It's like the I say it like this. It's like the Lost Boys in Peter Pan, you know, where they all like somehow get on this island together and they like camp out and they isolate themselves and they have tribal leaders, you know. And it's like in reality, you think about that. That's like a community of people who felt like they're, you know, we talked about the pastor talked about the orphan spirit today, right? And a whole bunch of orphans finding orphans, and that's what the Lost Boys were in Peter Pan, you know. Really good. And one guy comes and he's now their leader, you know, and I think people, you know, if we're gonna want to go that direction, like people who have an orphan spirit, oftentimes they will, and I've seen this a lot, especially. In the prophetic community, there will be like a person who's prophetic but has some major issues, and they'll kind of gather this like posse of people who are wounded, orphan, looking for a dad, and they'll start calling this man Papa, Dad, you know, Daddy, and all these things, and I'm like, there's something nasty about that, you know, and then they'll have their posse, and then, you know, then there starts to be like a strong finger on these people, and then, you know, you get into this swirl of just, it's toxic. There's a toxic, and I've seen that a lot. I've seen that a lot in the prophetic community. Yeah. And it's not good, you know, but I love what you said about gossip though, too, because, gossip, you know, I want to share this because it was my first ever experience seeing when I used to pray with this woman, this widow, who was my boss's mom, and she taught me to pray. And she was, they had a church. And so I learned this right after I got saved. And one day in prayer, I saw this creature. It was I saw a vision, and it was these two people talking back and forth, and there was this little tiny, like, looked like a mouse behind this guy, and I could see the vision. They were talking, and while they were talking, this girl who was right here, she goes down, and she goes out of my vision. I'm like, where'd she go? And she comes back up, and she has a bone, and she throws the bone over this guy, and it goes right to this little thing, and this little creature gets to be 100 times the size, and now is way bigger than these two people. And it's like this it's a morphed creature. It's like a rat mixed with a bull, mixed with a dog, fangs, like 3 or 4 rows of teeth. Its back legs are small. Its face is all messed up. It's got hair. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was freaked out when I saw this. And the Lord spoke to me. He says, a spirit of gossip.
Wow.
And he said, all it takes is one bone. And it grows exponentially.
Ugly.
Ugly, dude. It looked like out of a horror movie, and I don't like horror movies, and so it's probably why I didn't like what I saw. But I say that because when there's people who find each other,
Yeah.
or a group that finds each other, and there's just a little bit of that gossip, it starts to grow, and then it just overpowers and starts to bring so much involved, into a little circle. And
Yeah.
I'm sure being part of a community for so long, and you've experienced, gossip, and it's a tough thing to like dismantle after it starts the ball rolling.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is started because people have common problems. They have common pain. They have common wounds. They have common frustrations.
Yeah.
And then they just talk a little too much and cross a line.
Yeah.
And things begin to blow up, and it's
Yeah.
it's tough.
And it's crazy, like I said, like, you can be in a position where like something really did happen to you, so you're like the victim in a sense, and all of a sudden now, because you're sowing into gossip, now you become the one that's at fault when originally you didn't do anything wrong. It's like you were wronged, but all of a sudden now you know what I mean? You let that, and
Yes.
you let the Satan have a foothold, and all of a sudden it's just like now you're the one that's in the wrong. You know what I mean? So it's crazy how gossip can really switch the tables on you like really quickly.
Quick.
And sometimes you don't even realize it, and all of a sudden it's just like, whoa, wait a minute, And people, I will say that I will say this is that people have came back and have apologized and have admitted, to stuff. Hey, I just want to come back and say, and some haven't even came back to our church necessarily. They just came back just to be like, hey, you know what? I'm sorry that I left in this way. I'm sorry that I said these things. And then it's crazy though. I like those meetings because it's like, it's cool to have, and it's happened a couple of times since we've been in ministry. It's good to have that, but then it kind of like opens up another thing, because I'm like, and then they're like, I'm sorry, I said this and that, I told this person that, and they were sharing things to it, and it's just like, wait a minute, you just like they name drop someone else, and all of a sudden it's like you find out now that like someone else said something. It's like, wait a minute, I didn't even know I had a problem with that person, and you know what I mean? So it's like they're apologizing, you're good with them, but all of a sudden now your target, your radar shifts to this other random person. It's like, wait a minute, why do you have a problem with me? Like, what did I do to you?
Yeah.
So it's crazy, but I do appreciate those meetings where they come back and they do say like, hey, I'm sorry. Like I said, we've done that to our previous church. We went back and tied everything up, and the relationships mended everything and stuff. Even though we didn't necessarily have to, in a sense, we could have been like, well, they wanted us out, stuff like that, but we still are like, hey, we didn't leave in the best possible way, at least to say bye. Let's at least say our piece,
That's good.
And I think that's the sign of like a mature, believer, mature Christian,
Yes.
And we've always said this, like, especially us that are on stage leading in any type of like ministry and stuff, like you really shouldn't be in a position where like people have things bad to say about you that you haven't tried to resolve. You know what I mean?
It's good.
And we share that with our team all the time. It's very important for us. Like, we don't like having anyone on scheduling, serving, whether it's on stage back here, anything, serving in any capacity where it's like someone else, and one of our members looks at them and just like, well, you just did this, and this to me this week, or you offended me this week. And it's a real thing that happened. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's very important to us to like, we as leaders, we should be at a place even more so than just a regular congregation, church member. As leaders, staff, even a pastor, like you should be at a place where like everything should be patched up. It doesn't mean everyone's going to like you, but you should be able to patch things up and try to, humble yourself. Even in the crazy situations, you're like, I shouldn't have to do this, but hey, I'm going to try to make things right. They might not accept it. They might still be mad. They might say whatever, but hey, I feel like at least I'm in a good place. You know what I mean?
That's so important.
It's so important. Man, I feel like we can do this all day when it comes to church. And, I hope people are blessed by this episode. There's so much to unpack, but at the end of the day, don't leave. Don't gossip. Don't try to find another community where that's all they're going to do is talk about it. If you have to find another church, pray about it. And I would say for sure, one of the last things is if you have left in a crazy way, go back, try to make amends, even if it's just a message. I've literally got a direct message. No lie. I'll share this. No lie. Like maybe like a month ago, I got a direct message from somebody, and this is from 10 years. You know what I mean? This guy was like, hey, just want to say, I'm very sorry of how rude I was to you and your friends. And I was trying to think back, like, okay, like I know this guy and stuff. I know he was like, he had friends from our previous church and stuff. I'm like, trying to think back, and I was just like, I don't really remember him being like that. But basically in his whole message was just like, I found out that you guys left your previous church, and I knew someone from that church, and I was he didn't go to that church. He went to another church, and in that church, he was very like, people, no one leaves this church. Like if you leave, we talk bad about you, that type of feeling. And that's how it kind of was in our previous church and stuff. So like when he found out about that right away, like the target came to us, and he was just like, I guess he said stuff about us. I guess he felt a certain way about us, all these things, you know? And it wasn't until I started doing the podcast and kind of posting worship and just stuff that happened. He was just like, man, I just want to apologize. And he's a leader. He's actually a pastor. Hey, I just want to apologize for 10 years ago. You know, I said these things about you. I found out that you guys had left your previous church to start a Bible study. I was super religious at the time. I judged you guys. I'm sorry if I was ever rude to you. We had a circle of friends that would do like concerts and shows and stuff. So we'd see him out there. And every time we saw him, we were like cool with him. You know, he even spoke one time at our Bible study. We were cool with him and stuff. I would have never thought that he felt a certain way, but deep down he did. So 10 years later, 10 years, I'm no joke. This is like almost to the day. Wow. You know, this was back in June. He writes me that message. And I was just like, you know what? I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. If you want to know more about our story, about what happened, you know, any specifics, like I kind of gave him a quick, like, you know, we left in the right way, you know.
It's good. We
had meetings, so we didn't just leave and just, you know, try to start our own thing or whatever. Like my dad really did what he was supposed to and stuff. And he was just like, no, he's like, I believe you guys. Like, it's so amazing what you guys are doing. I'm seeing everything. I'm seeing your guys' videos and stuff. Like, it's a blessing, but I just wanted to apologize. 10 years, dude. Wow. So I would say anyone that's out there, fix your relationships. If you wrong somebody, anything, send people a message. I'm waiting on 10 messages. No, I'm kidding. I'm waiting for 10 DMs tonight, you know, when this drops. Like, I need 10 DMs today for, you know, someone thought, no, but for real, it's like, I'm not perfect, you know, but I have learned along the way for sure. And I hope this blesses somebody. And like I said, I'm glad that you've shared, because you have, you know, I come more from like a church aspect with church hurt, and you come more from like a leader's, you know, so it's like, it's good to share that, you know what I mean? So yeah. So I'm excited, man. I'm excited for this. Well, I hope you guys are blessed by that. I just want to share, like we have been sharing here, you know, if you guys would like to partner with us, if you guys would like to be a part of what's going on here at Against the Grain, text 84321. That's the phone number. You guys can text 84321 and sow a seed into this, you know, into what we're doing here. It's so amazing. You know, we got the camera set up. We got everything, all this stuff, you know, it costs money, you know, resources, our time. We want to bring more, you know, guests. We want to do more things, but we definitely need a budget to do that. So please send a text message. The number is 84321, and just text your dollar amount to give. If you want to give $8,431, go for it. But that's the phone number. 84321 is the phone number, and then just text your dollar amount. Text that amount, and it's going to lead you to a website, totally secure. Just type in Harvest Time Church once you're at that website, and you'll find our logo right there, and then that'll allow you to give. So we appreciate all you guys for sewing in and giving in, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Have a good one.
See ya.